Fun fact about me. The Neverglades isn't the only thing I've written. I actually have quite a few stories available on No Sleep and my personal subreddit. My hope is that this channel will be a way of introducing you to some hidden Pharaohverse gems, stuff that you'll enjoy just as much as the Neverglades. A couple of years ago, I released a series called The Cruelest Months, a group of horror stories linked by one key theme, the months and seasons in which they're set. Think New Year's, Valentine's Day, etc. You might also notice some ties to the Neverglades here and there. If you spot any connections between the stories, I'd love to get your observations in the comments section below. Spring is just around the corner, and as the weather gets warmer, you'll see more and more kids playing outside. Innocent childhood fun, or so you might think. For Heather Tate, her daughter's newfound obsession with nature is starting to scare her. There's something lurking in the trees, something not quite human. The following statement was taken by Officer Zachary Atwater in his interview with Pacific Glade resident Heather Tate. The subject of this interview was the disappearance of Heather's 9-year-old daughter, Juniper. Let's start with something simple. Can you describe your daughter for me?
Sure. She's small for her age. Has freckles all across her nose and down her cheeks. Brown hair that she wears in braids. I used to help her weave them, but lately she's been insisting on doing them herself, so they're a little lopsided. She likes wearing bright colors. Pastel things, like the kind of shades you might find in a baby's room.
Thank you. I see here that you two live alone. What happened to Daddy Tate?
Oh, well, he's not at home anymore. He's doing a tour with the military overseas. Came back home for Christmas. We haven't really heard from him in a couple of months. He used to send us letters every other week, but they've been coming in trickles lately.
How does Juniper deal with her dad being gone for so long?
She finds ways to distract herself. I don't think it bothers her much, to be honest. Juniper's got a very active imagination. She makes these dolls out of twigs and leaves from the forest, and she'll set up little adventures for them. Fairy tale quests and tea parties and that sort of thing. The leaves dry up after a while, so I help her find new ones when I can.
How often does Juniper play in the forest?
Every day, I'd say? Sometimes more than once. We have an agreement. She can go to the little clearing behind the first line of trees, but no further than that. Not by herself, at least. I always sit in the porch swing and keep an eye on her whenever she plays in the woods.
Is that really safe? What if there were animals out there?
We've been at that house for 5 years now, and never saw anything bigger than a rabbit. Besides, I wasn't too far away during playtime. I could always run over and scoop her up if we spotted anything dangerous.
Tell me what happened in the days before Juniper went missing. Was there anything different about her behavior?
There was one thing. It was starting to get dark, so I called her over to wrap up playtime, and she came bounding back with this purple flower in her hands. As a gardener, I've seen a lot of flowers before, but never anything quite like that. 6 petals exactly, each perfectly curved, with patterns that looked like staring eyes and a cluster of little orange stalks in the center. Juniper wanted to keep it. I told her that she should put it back since we didn't know what it was and it could be dangerous, like poison ivy. And she got mad. Called me all sorts of nasty names and screamed at me and stormed inside before I could get a word in.
That was unusual for her?
Very. Juniper's a quiet child. When she gets angry, she kind of retreats into herself and broods, but she never explodes like that. By the time I followed her inside, she'd already locked herself in her room. I listened at her door and I could hear her muttering to herself, but I couldn't make out any of the words.
How long did this behavior last?
It came in patches. Most of the time she was her usual quiet self. But whenever the flower was around, she was quick to snap at me. She'd woven it into the hair of one of her stick figure dolls and started carrying it around the house like an old security blanket. I didn't like it. It left a strange purple residue whenever it touched the walls, and I had to scrub it off more times than I could count. When I had the audacity to suggest we should go pick some different flowers in the woods, she went ballistic, shouting obscene words at me that I wouldn't expect any child to know, let alone a sweet girl like Juniper.
Yeesh, that must have been rough.
I'm not good with discipline, officer. Thankfully, I've never had to be. Juniper rarely acts out, and it's usually only when her father's around. For some reason, she tends to misbehave when he comes home. I think she likes it better when it's just the two of us. Or at least she used to. I don't know why else she would, well, you know.
Run away?
I guess you could say that, yeah?
Why don't you tell me exactly what happened the day she went missing?
Juniper had been shutting herself in her room more and more lately, instead of playing outside. I rarely saw her except when she came downstairs for dinner. She always brought that doll with her, and she would clutch it to her chest while she wolfed down her food. She'd stopped being meticulous with her braids, so all these little frayed ends were poking out. I don't think she'd been showering. There was kind of an earthy smell about her, like she'd been rolling around in the dirt outside. One day she didn't come down for dinner, even though I must have called her a dozen times. So I went upstairs to go get her. Her door wouldn't open no matter how much I jiggled the knob, which was strange because we never installed a lock in her room. There was something pushing back from the other side. I was starting to get worried now, so I called her name and tried to brute force my way in with my shoulder. It took several minutes of pushing, but finally I managed to get it open. That was when I saw the vines.
Vines?
They were everywhere. Growing out of the walls, climbing over her bed and dresser and nightstand, curled around her lamp, tangled up all along the floor. A whole patch of them had grown over the door, which was why I'd had such a hard time getting in. Each of them was overgrown with purple flowers. I'd never seen anything like it before. I was so distracted by the weirdness of it all, I didn't notice the most important thing right away. Juniper wasn't there.
No offense, Miss Tate, but this sounds awfully hard to believe.
I don't know what you want me to say, officer. It's the truth. Why would I lie to you about something like this?
Never mind. Just tell me what happened next. Did you find Juniper?
Yes, in a sense.
Go on.
I tore the house apart looking for her. At first I thought she must be hiding from me, so I went through the attic, then the basement, then checked all the cabinets and the nooks behind the furniture. She wasn't there. I was starting to panic. Then I smelled something coming from outside. That rich, earthy smell, the one I had been noticing on Juniper lately. I ran to the back door and flung it open. She was standing at the edge of the forest. Her doll was lying in a heap of sticks on the ground. The purple flower was tucked in her hair like a pin. It almost seemed to breathe. The petals pulsed in and out like there was a heartbeat buried somewhere in its center. She wasn't looking at me. She was staring into the forest, holding up her hands like she was reaching out to someone I couldn't see. Then there was a crunching in the leaves, and something came rustling out of the forest. Its skin was covered in layers of deep brown bark. It had a vaguely human shape, but instead of arms, 6 thin branches with finger-like appendages sprouted from its sides. Its face was just a gnarled hole in the bark, like the kind you might see in an old tree trunk. The dirt smell that came from it was overwhelming. Purple flowers sprouted up and down its body. It was...
Miss Tate, if you're gonna just tell us stories, I think our time might be better spent...
Fuck you, officer. What do you want me to say? My daughter's been taken. You think I'm making up stories? If you were a real police officer, you wouldn't be wasting your time with me. You'd do your damn job and find her.
Alright, calm down. I'll hear you out. For the sake of argument, you saw this figure in the forest. What happened next?
I was terrified. I screamed for Juniper to come back inside, but she only looked back once. The flower in her hair was still pulsing, and I saw that her hazel eyes had changed to a dark purple. She reached up and took the thing's branch in her hand. And she walked with it back into the trees. I almost ran after her, but I couldn't. A few steps into the forest and she was gone.
Well, you did the smart thing by coming right to us. The first 48 hours are the most important in a missing persons case. We'll find her.
I want to believe you, officer. I really do. But I don't think there's any coming back from whatever that thing did to her. Send your men in there. Do what you have to do. I'd be thrilled if she came home. But I think she's part of the forest now.
Heather requested to end the interview here due to emotional distress. A search party was quickly organized and has been sweeping the forest for 3 days. We have been unable to make contact with her husband overseas, and Heather herself has decided to leave town and stay in a hotel down the coast for the duration of the search. As of today, no sign of Juniper Tate has been found. Hey everyone, thanks for listening to today's video. If you like what you heard, feel free to leave a comment below, and please subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. If you'd like to support the channel even further, I highly encourage picking up a copy of the Neverglades books, which are all available on Amazon right now. Or, please consider donating to my Patreon account at the link provided. Hope you're having a wonderful day, and as always, don't forget to stay weird.